here. Well, welcome to day 3 of this PoLS-T High School Physics Teacher Network. It's great to see so many of you again here. Thank you for joining. For those who are new to the network, it's a network by high school physics teachers for high school physics teacher. I'm just here to facilitate, although I do have some credentials. I'm a certified physics high school teacher, and I taught in a high school for a while I was getting my PhD in the Netherlands. I don't know where my certificate is. I misplaced it. It's probably not valid here anyway because it was in another country. I want to also briefly introduce Sarah, who is really instrumental in organizing this entire meeting, and lest I forget at the end of the meeting to ask for a big round of applause. Let's do it now, as Sarah is really the person who gets this all going. And also truly instrumental to the network is Isa, who is a PhD candidate in the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and who will actually be the moderator today for our final keynote. Thank you so much, Isa, for all you do to help coordinate this network. So just a couple of quick reminders before I hand it over to Isa. Same format as the last 2 days. Keynote, which is going to be about 30 minutes. Please dive right into the chat. Let's have a parallel conversation in the chat while the talk is going on. The last 30 minutes will be a Q&A, which will be moderated by Isa. And in order to ask a question, you can, of course, type it in the chat, but it might be better if you click on the reactions button there at the bottom. And then at the bottom of the little panel that shows up, there's a raise hand button, and then we'll give you the floor in the order that people raise their hands. We'll have a short break at 2, followed by a panel. The moderator today is Dagmara Sakowska from Poland. And we have a huge panel today, so it's going to be quite a discussion that we'll have. And at 3 p.m., we'll adjourn this Zoom meeting and transfer the discussion to spatial chat. Quite a few of you showed up the last 2 days. We hope to have many more interesting connections and groups who are able to socialize with each other in that space. Instructions will follow in case you've missed that the first 2 days. So also a quick advertisement for the PoLS-T monthly speaker series. We're taking a break for July, and we will resume our talks in late August or September. We're in the process of lining up a great group of speakers. So I hope that you will all participate. It's a great way of connecting also to others. If you have a suggestion, if you think, oh, this would be a really good speaker, just put them in the chat right now. We'll take notes and we'll make sure that that person gets invited. And just dream big. I will, if you think of somebody who would be great, but you think, oh, we're never going to get that person. It's my task to try to get that person. So just put some really great names in the chat, and I'll go after them and try to get them to be a speaker. The PoLS-T talks that we've had, and we've had a couple of really exciting ones recently, are all on the PoLS-T YouTube channel, as well as all of the talks from the first conference, and all the keynotes from this conference will also be there. So, and if you're not in the Slack workspace for the network, please join, because that's our way of remaining, in contact with each other, and asynchronously, if you want, having a discussion about teaching, about different issues that are relevant to your profession. I think that, Sarah is putting both the link for the YouTube channel and an invitation to the network workspace in the chat. So there will be a post, and I want to say this now because at the end I may not have an opportunity to say that. There will be a post-event survey. We hope you will complete it. We're experimenting with different formats. Last year, everything was synchronous. As you've noticed, we've moved some of the activities to an asynchronous format. We'd love to have your feedback on that. And finally, at the end of the panel, we'll put in the chat a link to a participation certificate for those of you who need that. So with that, and without further ado, I'm turning it over to Isa to introduce our third and final keynote speaker. Enjoy.
Thank you, Eric, for getting us going today. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Jon Bergmann, our plenary speaker, for the third and final day. Jon, as I'm sure you all know, is one of the pioneers of the flipped classroom movement. He has over 3 decades of experience as an educator, including 24 years he spent in the classroom as a middle and high school teacher. He is currently a teacher right now as well, and he teaches physics, chemistry, and geology. Jon is also an author. He's written 10 books, including Flip Your Classroom, and he has received a number of awards for his contributions as an educator. While my introduction cannot possibly cover all he's accomplished, I will say in brief that it's very likely that each and every one of us who has been influenced at some point by his work. On a personal note, I want to share that Flip Your Classroom, first published around 2012, 2013, correct me if I'm wrong, is one of those books that I return to over and over again, and it has informed my trajectory in improving my own pedagogy at different stages. So from being a graduate student in molecular genetics with 0 teaching experience, where I was just dumped in a lab essentially in front of eager undergrads, to now where I am an education researcher, it's a book, it's a resource that I go back to over and over again. In addition, Jon's work changed my perspective about teaching, where I had more of a banking mindset of education to one where I prioritized relationships with students and mentorship as a key mechanism for learning. This focus is still evident in my research of collaborative research with Eric Mazur. And I just finally want to say that I think this speaks to both Jon's experience and his expertise and his ability to make really complicated ideas accessible, from the novice to the more experienced educators. I think, he has something to offer. So I'm very grateful to have Jon here today and to learn from him. So with that, here's Jon Bergmann speaking to us about rethinking physics education.
Wow, what a school year it's been. Buzzwords. Are you sick of the word remote learning? Hybrid learning? How about this word? Pivot. Oh, if you hear that word one more time, you're going to throw up. Hi, I'm Jon Bergmann, and like you, I'm a physics teacher. I teach physics, chemistry, and geology at a suburban school in Houston, Texas. And I've also had a weird life, in the world of education. I started teaching in 1986. I'm old. Taught at middle school first, and then I taught high school most of my career. And for 24 years, I taught in Colorado, and what a great time that was. Towards the end of that time, about year 19, I guess it was, myself and Aaron Sams helped develop and pioneer the flipped learning movement. I know that Eric has done some significant work in the higher ed space. I've had this crazy privilege. I've written 10 books. And yeah, so I've had a crazy career. So I taught for 24 years in Colorado, and then I was director of technology for 2 years in the Chicago metropolitan areas. And then I did something that many of you may someday want to do, or maybe you despise what I did. I became an educational consultant. I was the guy who came in with the clipboard, walked around, and or the clipboard, the PowerPoint, and what's the definition of an expert? Somebody who's from out of town with the PowerPoint. I was that guy, and I it was a great privilege. I really got to travel all over the world and see schools, from Australia to Dubai to New Zealand to Argentina to China to London and Turkey, all over the place. At a certain point, I realized that I was trying to tell other people's stories, and I felt the pull back to the classroom. So 2 years ago, I started teaching again. So I'm back teaching. I'm just a regular teacher, like you, at a high school, probably not dissimilar from yours, working to do the best that I can with my students. So let's start by imagining something. I want you to imagine that your students come to your classroom with a wide variety of ability levels. Some come with the math gene, right? Physics teachers, and they get it, man, math, easy. And some come really struggling. But imagine that oftentimes you get students like in the middle of the year, like after 3 weeks you get a new student, another week, another week, another week. I had a chance to talk with some teachers in Ramstein, Germany, Department of Defense teachers, and this is their reality. Oftentimes when a serviceman, American serviceman, is deployed or moves, I think whatever the term is, to Germany, then the students will miss a month of school when they're moving from Georgia to Ramstein, Germany, or whatever it might be. And they have to figure out a way to teach all students. And so you can't teach the same thing at the same time, all the students, or you'll just be unsuccessful. And they have been very, very successful with what I really want to talk about is the model that we're going to introduce today. And my guess is you're saying, wait a second, that's kind of my reality right now. My kids or will be my reality, because when we go back to school soon, right? We're going back to school just a month or so. We're going to face a crazy different reality post-COVID, right? Hoping at least we can all actually be back in school. We'll see what happens, right? I did an interesting exercise, just thought exercise on the internet. I asked the question, COVID and school. And this is what I found. This is what a class looks like in Taiwan, or did. Argentina. University of Oklahoma. That looks fun. Not really. Pantheon University in France. Japan. The University of Kentucky. The Vatican. South Korea. And then I looked deeper, the United Kingdom. These are pictures from the teacher's perspective. Stanford Med, Furman University, Harvard. This is not Eric's class, but it could be. Indonesia, South Korea, Brookings Institute, physics class at the University of Hawaii, New York University, Switzerland, the USA, and physics class, Westlake High School. If you're out there, Westlake High School physics teacher, there you are. And Carleton High School, Minnesota, also a physics class, I was told at least. So what are we going to face? What are we going to face when we walk back in August or September of this year? What's going to be the reality of our lives? And I want to use some terms, and they're a bit controversial. I think what we're going to face is we're going to face learning loss. Our students are going to come back to our classes having lost some learning. Now, I know this is controversial because the students have learned things in the pandemic and some very important lessons. So don't hear that I think what's happening is many educational companies are trying to make a bunch of money off of educators, off of schools, because they can, hey, we solved learning loss. I did some research, found out, what's some of the research on learning loss. A study done by McKinsey and Company with 350,000 students. Now it's K-5, so I couldn't find anything that was K or high school kids. But I thought it was interesting. They segregated, and this is the amount of students, how much their scores dropped by grade level, and also segregated by schools with less than 50% students of color and those with more than 50% students of color. Or, I didn't say that right, more than 50% students of color, more than 50% white students. And sadly, the results are not that great. They then said, if we make some projections about this school year that's just now finished, what is our projections? Again, McKinsey and Company says, if there's no progress in the way we teach, that's worst case scenario. Second case is we hold the status quo. Third case, we learn how to do remote learning better. And fourth case, we actually get back to school. And this was what the projections were. They said if we don't improve the way we teach during this school year that's already expired, we're going to get an average of 10 months loss. If we hold the status quo, it's 9. All right, if we learn how to teach remotely better, 6. And if we literally get back to school, 5. Now, most of us, I don't know. I'm not sure what percentage, I haven't seen that data, of schools that actually went back. My school was able to get back to mostly full-time kids with masks and all that kind of stuff. I don't know where you guys were at, but let's say best case that we've lost 5 months of learning. Think of that 5 months in an algebra class when they're about to take a physics class. Wow, that's going to be a problem. But also there's a weird reality. We say 5 months, but some kids thrived in the remote setting, and they're way ahead, and some kids are way behind. So it's not like it's not like they're all 5 months behind, and I can treat like they're all 5 months behind. How do I do that, right? That's a big question. So where are we going to look? Where are we going to look to find the answer to this? I'm going to argue we want to take a look back. And I want us to look back to this cat right here, Benjamin Bloom. You guys remember him, right? Bloom's taxonomy and all that kind of stuff. Well, Ben Bloom in 1984 wrote what I'm going to argue is might be one of the most important papers in the history of education. And this is the paper right here. It's the 2 sigma problem. The search for methods of group instruction that are as good as tutoring. So, one-on-one tutoring. So, evidence suggests that the best way to learn is for your daughter, your son, a student to learn via one-on-one tutoring. So you hire a tutor. So you're Prince Harry, right? And the Queen says, I'm going to hire a tutor, and he's going to tutor Prince Harry, and he's going to learn that way. That's the best way. All right? So here's the graph from the article. You can kind of see the oldie font here. Conventional instruction gets you one result right here. And then if you move to mastery learning, you get 1 standard deviation improvement. But if you move to one-on-one tutoring, you get 2 standard deviations improvement. We could implement mastery learning, but most of us are still teaching this way. And these are 1 and 2 standard deviations improvement. Dr. Bloom said this: if the research on the 2 sigma problem yields practical methods that the average teacher or school faculty can learn in a brief period of time and use with little more cost or time than conventional instructions, it would be an educational contribution of the greatest magnitude. It would change popular notions about human potential and would have significant effects on what schools can and should do with the educational years each society requires of its young people. An educational contribution of the greatest magnitude. Folks, I'm going to make a bold claim. I'm going to claim that the problem has been solved. We know the answer to the 2 sigma problem. In fact, let's listen in to a student in a 2 sigma class.
This class is more laid back. It's chill, but you're still learning. Like, you're actually letting in the knowledge. It's like the flipped part of it. Like, you're more independent and you can go at your own pace, but you're still on track. You can't fail. It's kind of impossible to fail this class, to be honest, because you're literally given every resource possible to pass this class. Like, you are able, like, master it, because you don't move on until you have mastered it. I mean, the test, not necessarily, but, like, your mastery quizzes, like, you know them and, like, the notes, and then the quizzes are with the notes, and, like, just every resource that you give us helps us to succeed. It's like, you know what you're going to be doing, and you can go ahead. Like, you go at your own pace, you can go ahead, you can be a little bit behind because you get time in class to also work on your stuff. We are capable of learning it on our own with all the resources that you give us. So
hopefully you've kind of figured this out. We've got this mastery piece in this double sigma class that we want to take a look at. And you notice you talked about flip. So what we're really talking about is a merging of flipped learning with mastery learning. But before we can talk too much about mastery learning, let's learn about some of the basics of flipped learning. So maybe it's best to look at Bloom's taxonomy, back to Mr. Bloom. And if you looked at my class those first 24 years, you know what you found? You found that I spent the vast majority of my time, use that time as the area of the triangle, on the lower levels of Bloom's, at the remembering and understanding level. I was standing up teaching them Newton's laws. I was teaching them, friction problems. I was teaching them momentum problems, or whatever it might be. And then we had little time in class to apply. We did experiments and that kind of stuff. But usually this stuff at the top, if you will call it the hard stuff, I sent them home to do. But of course, in a flipped learning environment, what do? You flip Bloom's taxonomy on its head, and you spend less class time on the lower level introductory information, and you spend class time at the higher levels of Bloom's. And in fact, as I've thought more deeply about this, I think honestly the best picture is this right here, the Bloom's pyramid. And again, time is the variable. You spend less class time here. The bulk of your class time is at the application analysis level. And I just don't think it's realistic to spend too much time up here in a K-12 classroom. Maybe at the university, or particularly at a PhD level or master's thesis level, certainly up here. But, and again, hear me carefully, I'm not anti-lecture. A lot of people think that flipped learning is anti-lecture. Not true. I still lecture. I've got these cheesy videos on momentum and friction and electricity and magnetism and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, and you probably have had your students watch some videos because of the pandemic. I think you get the idea. So what's the answer? Maybe you've already heard it out. It is the flipped mastery learning. So it's a merging of two pedagogies, flipped learning and mastery learning. And this is the mastery learning cycle. And I want you to just kind of pay close attention. It always starts with clear, very specific objectives. Like, the student will be able to solve a Newton's second law problem given the following parameters, or something very, very specific, all right? And then, so you've set that up, then you have a pretest to see what they already know, all right? And then we move over here to the independent space. That's the stuff they're going to do on their own. That tends to be the flip video or some reading. By the way, don't just flip with video, you could do with text. Eric flips his classes with text-based stuff, right? Then we have group space. This group space is the activities you're going to do in the class. We call it the group space. Then you have some sort of an assessment called a mastery check. And then, if needed, you remediate them. And then they start the process with the next learning objective. If you remediate, you got to come back to another place if that's necessary. So that's a big idea on the mastery cycle, I guess. So the bulk of the time, I want to talk to you about sort of the features, for lack of a better term, of flipped mastery learning. Now, let me say this also. This is not I'm not going to be able to teach you how to do every aspect of flipped mastery learning in this short period of time. I have some resources that will help you get started. I'm in fact at the very moment, this whole summer, my main goal is to write a book. I'm writing a book. Like I said, I've written 10. This will be my 11th book, and this is the entire focus of this. And I hope that you'll pick it up. It'll be available sometime next year, like 2022. But what are the 11 pillars? Number one is there is no whole class instruction. Wait a second, what did you say? I have not lectured to the whole class since 2007. Now, hear me carefully. I still lecture in these cheesy videos that my students are watching right here. So I still think students don't know what they don't know, and I still think there's a place for me to teach them what they don't know. So I mainly make videos, but I also allow my students the option of reading. So as a note, I give them choice. Number two is they must have what's called a flexible pace. So the idea of mastery is, if you think about it, you're probably thinking, this is impossible. My students are going to be at different places in the content. Exactly. So I don't like to say that they work at their own pace, because if I found this, maybe your students are different than mine, but if I told my students they could work at their own pace, I would have some students who wouldn't have a pace. True that, right? That's true. So I set up benchmarks. At the end of every week, I say, or at the beginning of the week, I say, by the end of this week, you need to be through objective 5 or something like that. And if they don't, they have some deductions and points on their grades. So it's a flexible pace that they're moving class through. Next up is what I call extreme differentiation. I am able to differentiate and really challenge my high students and really remediate and help the students who struggle. It's magical. In fact, let's watch a video of what a typical classroom looks like. Note, this is last year pre-pandemic. I note that was my geology class, so it wasn't physics class, but I think you get the idea. I like to call this like my 6-ring circus or whatever. I've got lots of different things happening at the same time. It's organized, and folks, it's magical. Absolutely magical. Works all the time. I do this with chemistry. It's crazy. You can even do this in a chemistry class. It's the only way I know how to teach, to be honest with you. In fact, recently, it was towards the end of the school year, I had a student come up to me and say, Mr. Bergmann, I'm thinking about taking physics, but I'm worried. I said, how come? As a student that I just knew, we have like an advisory, he's in my advisory, and I said, what's going on? And he said, I'm afraid of the class. He says, do you teach it with that mastery method? And I said, yeah. Oh, man, I hear that makes it so much easier. I'm not sure the right answer is easier, but it's more doable for students. It takes off the pressure. Because if a student, we'll talk later about it, the summit assessments, particularly, my school is a high-performing school, and high-performing schools, there's so much pressure to be super, good at everything, and if you can't score super high on the test, there's just huge worry. Anyways, number 4, teacher-student interactions. You know what I do most of my time? I spend most of my time doing is I spend most of my time walking around and talking to kids. And I feel like I really know my students so much better. I know them better cognitively, but also affectively. I really can get inside their brains. Number 5, the class becomes a collaborative moment. It's not me against the students. I'm not trying to play gotcha. My students really are working together to master certain goals and objectives that have been previously very well spelled out. Probably you've already got this list of objectives. You just need to master flippy it. Is that a word? I don't know. I'll make it a word. Let's talk about the formative assessment, because what I'm doing is I'm walking in the room as I'm doing formative assessments. I'm walking around. You can see me having one again, more clips from the geology class, and I'm having a formative check with my students. I'm asking them to prove to me that they've learned something, and I have to check that they've actually learned it. And if they haven't, I'll make them go back and relearn it. I don't know if you've had this experience, but I'll get a stack of papers from, either it's a test or even just a regular assignment. And I'm going to check. One student gets an 84. That's pretty good. Another kid's an 80. Another kid's a 96. But one kid gets a 32. And you know what I used to do? I used to take that 32 and put it in the grade book. And when I put that in the grade book, we moved on. But now if I have a kid who brings me the 32, I'm going to say, no, go back and fix it. In fact, by the way, I expect students essentially to get an 80 on every single thing. And as a note, there's nothing magical about 80%. I've seen any number between 70 and 80%. As I've been writing the book, I've been talking to teachers. I've probably talked to 25 Flip Mastery teachers across the world, and I've seen the range from 70 to 80. So I'm at the high end, but I do teach at a high-performing school, so I'm going to expect my students to do 80% work. So they have to do that, and I expect them to actually master the content. So what about summative assessments? So here's the heart and soul of the mastery course or idea, is they get to the end of, let's say I've got a unit, and it's got 4 lessons. Let's make maybe 5, but whatever, we'll call 4 lessons, all right? A student comes to me, check, oh, they didn't quite get 3, and then sometimes they move on to 4, but then once they've done 4, they come back and get number 4 done. Now they can take the summative assessment. So they take the summative assessment. My expectation, honestly, folks, is that they get greater than 80%. Now, you may disagree with how I do that. If the student doesn't get an 80, they get a 75 or even a 79, I expect them to retake the exam until they get an 80. Now, I know some teachers who just give the exam one time, allow test corrections. There's lots of ways to do this, but I let them take it over and over again. And but that means that delays their progress, if that makes sense. Because now they have to go back while other students are moving ahead who've actually passed this. But it works, I promise, it does. One way I've made it work is that I have created thousands of versions of the test. So in my learning management system, I use Brightspace, by the way, sometimes called D2L. D2L is the company. And what I do is I have these folders, the test banks, test bank 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I write maybe 5 or 6 questions or 10 questions or whatever. And then when the student sits down, it randomly picks so many questions that I specify from each folder. And if I write these questions well, then that means they get a different test. So every kid who takes the test gets a different test. And my platform even has like what they call mathematical, or they call 2 + 2 questions. And there what I can do is I could say given, and I'm typing in, it's like a code, X kilograms, an X kilogram cart on a 15-degree angle or a Y degree angle, and then the numbers change each time, so their answers will change each time if they end up with the same question. So there really are thousands of versions of the test that are possible. Another hallmark of a Flip Mastery class is that you can give immediate feedback. In one sense, as I walk around the room, I am giving immediate feedback formatively, but I can also do this summatively. So once a student takes the exam we talked about just a few minutes ago, they know they're going to come up to me. I'm going to go over their exam. Remember, they're not all taking the exam on the same day. They're taking it when they're ready. And when they take it, let's just listen in on a session. A student in my chemistry class had come up to me, and I recorded this. So this student has missed a particular question, and now I'm going over the question with him having a conversation, and the question is up on the screen that you can see, and we're going over what he did wrong, so that when he takes it again, if he chooses to, then he'll know what he got wrong. But he still has to pass with the 80, and if he doesn't, then he's going to be required to take it over again. And now I'm about to check what his score is. I'm re-entering, because I gave him some partial credit. Notice I also had a piece of paper, so I was grading his piece of paper where he was showing his work. You can see the next student showing up to get his tests. We actually called them boss battles set up. And I'm pretty sure this student passed. Watch what happens. Oh, he sees his score. He's very happy. And notice what I do. I've got a gong. And we all celebrate when a student passes their boss battle, and it's a lot of fun for the students. They love that aspect of what's going on. Next thing I often do, that often Flip Mastery teachers are doing, is they're gamifying it. And I've gamified mine, just super simple deal. I have like a leaderboard, and which objective they're on, they get a magnet, and we move it across. I have been so surprised that this has been so effective for high school juniors and seniors. Mr. Bergmann, can I move my mark? Can I move my mark? Yes, you can move your mark. They just love moving their mark across the board. That's all I do. It's a little spreadsheet. And number 11, the last one, it's all about relationships. I believe that good teaching is only good when you can connect with students. And I just feel like, I don't know, I had some really kind words shared with me from my students at the end of the school year, just how much they felt like I cared, which I do, but it's good to hear from them sometimes. It makes a difference. Let's take a look at another clip. This is a year and a half ago or so, one of my physics students.
But it's getting faster, right? So it's going, it's around 10. After 1 second, it's going 10, and then 20, and then 30, and then 40. And I drop this every second. It's going 10 meters per second faster. 10, and 20, and 30. So the difference is what they're getting.
Can I come take it?
And so here she just had passed her boss battle. This is actually a year ago, no gong. The gong became a new thing this year. But anyways, she was awesome and she did well, and I feel like that makes the connections with the students. So those are the 11 things. And now I want to talk about what COVID might make possible. Now, let me first say this. COVID has been a tragedy. I'm sure you have. It's been a horrible tragedy. But also I think, I'm going to say opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to rethink how we teach. I mean, we've all had a big reset in our lives. We've been stuck at home. We've had to decide what really matters to us. It's been an introspective year for so many people. I know it has been for me. And I've so changed during the COVID time. I also realize this is an opportunity for us to reset when we go to school this fall, to rethink how we teach. I'm not going to argue what we teach. I believe physics education is super valuable. Most students should take physics. I mean, we can all talk about that. And other people in this conference will do that very well. But it's important to rethink how we teach. The traditional method really doesn't work. It doesn't, guys. Research bears it out. I mean, if we're scientists, and we are, and we believe in research, then we ought to believe the research that says that passive learning doesn't work. Active learning is what works. And I'm going to argue that flipped, and especially when merged with mastery, is the ideal active way for students to learn. So yeah, I want to really, really encourage you to rethink and think outside of the box. If we use the same old thinking, we're going to get the same results, and that's not going to work. It's not going to fly anymore. We've got students who've been learning and thriving in the remote world, and they're not going to stand for a boring lecture anymore because they can know that they can just go find it on YouTube. And that's the reality of it, isn't it? Let me show you some pictures. Some pictures that I've gotten I got these about 2 years ago. I use these in my TED Talk. I encourage you to listen to it if you ever have a chance to. But in my TED Talk, as I was preparing for that, I reached out to people who are doing flipped and flipped mastery learning across the world, and I said, send me a picture of your class. Notice how these classes look. This is what one looks like in Iceland. This class, oh my gosh. I visited this school in Iceland. What an amazing thing they're doing with like the dropouts of Icelandic education, and they have changed the entire lives of these students. This is one of the great flip learning teachers in Taiwan. Morocco. This guy's flipped the whole school. It's an English language school in Morocco. See how active they are. Again, pre-pandemic, so you're probably freaking out as you see these pictures. Singapore, Iran. My friend Reza in Iran, and the work he's done with mastery and flip learning in Iran is amazing. Harvard Medical School. I got a chance to visit Richard Schwartzstein's class. That's Richard there, kind of in the, I guess, the right. And Richard has done some amazing stuff. They flipped Harvard Medical School. So, by the way, if you think, oh, I'm teaching my students how to learn the hard way by lecture and tests and finals and da-da-da-da, because that's the way we do it in college, that may not be true, guys. That may not be true. This is the first flipped school in all of New Zealand, Ashurst Primary School. I got a chance to visit this school, and recently I've been actually talking with their people, because they've really done so much with mastery just in preparation for this book I'm writing on mastery learning. Oh my gosh, what an amazing cast of characters they've got there. So it's a K-8 school, by the way, and what they're saying is that their students are the best prepared when they get to the high school, the equivalent of the high school for them. Hong Kong, Nigeria, Turkey, the first flipped university, an engineering school in Turkey, and they're flipping. This is crazy, guys. The United Kingdom, Spain, Australia, China, Argentina. By the way, here in Argentina, I visited these schools. In Argentina, they're flipping the entire province of Misiones, like a whole state, with 300,000 students, K-12, close to where I used to live in Chicago, and right in my class in Houston, Texas. There we're doing, looks like, breadboards, my physics class, working with the students in the class. So let's, as we're closing, let's hear from some students about their thoughts on flip mastery.
I think that flip mastery is a very useful tool to use in class, because it is a good practice of time management and being organized, since we can watch the videos at home and come to school to get straight into doing the classwork. And that means that we're ready for assessments, we're not behind or anything like that. So, yeah, and we get good results in assessments.
In class time, we have more time to do the practical work. When studying at home, you can make use of the study for 25 minutes and have 5-minute break system. This way, you will always be at the peak of your focus and have time to reset. You can advance only once the teacher has seen your work and thinks you're prepared for the next stage. I would highly recommend the Flip Mastery learning system, and I think all schools should be using it.
To work at your own pace, and it fits you whether you're more slow or work at a faster pace. It also means that you can do the test whenever you feel comfortable, meaning you'll get better results in the end.
With mastery learning, I found it way easier to go at my own pace, so that I knew if I was behind, I could catch up by myself and not have to rely on the teachers as much.
So I've been doing flip learning for a while, but mastery learning is an experiment this year. And what I've noticed is that it doesn't seem to matter what level the students are working at. They work at their own pace, they're engaged, and they feel confident in the material when they come up and do their checkpoint flip mastery test with me. And because I'm seeing them and giving them individual feedback, we both feel confident about their progress, and only then will they move on. So it means that they will only be assessed once they have shown me that they are confident in all of the concepts, so that everybody will be assessed at different times. So we're in essence doing less, but doing it better.
I think the mastery learning system is a really good way to accurately get the grade students deserve. With the mastery learning system, I think it gives kids the opportunity to really work for their grade and decide how much they care about the outcome of their work. It is a lot less stressful than getting a random grade, because you know around where the grade will fall and what grade you truly deserve.
I've enjoyed using the flipped classroom method for 2 reasons. First, the flipped classroom method allows students to watch the videos at their own pace. Secondly, the flipped classroom method enables students to ask questions over the videos during class.
What I learned in Mr. Bergmann's class was really just how far I could push myself, mentally and academically. So I had his physics class, and since that has a lot of math in it, I struggled with that class quite a bit. So in order to pass his tests, or boss battles, you would have to get a grade 80 or above in order to say you're done with it. And because of that, I got to take the test a lot of times, and so I would be out taking time outside of class, before school started and after school started, in his classroom, taking these tests and asking him questions about things I had gotten wrong on the test. And it differs from other classes because whatever the material is, whatever grade you get on the test, you're done with that stuff. With this class, it really doesn't work that way because you have to know it in order to get a grade. Otherwise, if you don't know it, you still have to take it. And so now that I have done that, I know I really can put effort with the teacher outside his class, really trying to learn this. And so that's what flipped mastery learning has done for me.
Are you motivated as I am? I know I'm proud of my students for what they've done and what they've accomplished. And I challenge you to rethink how you teach. Could you teach differently? I think the answer is yes. I know I'm asking a lot. This is a lot of work, but this is a time to reset and rethink. Now, if you want more information, what I encourage you to go to my website at jonbergmann.com. Probably the best thing you can do is pick up a copy of our first book, Flip Your Classroom. In the second half, we talk about flip mastery. Although some of I would say that some of the mastery stuff that were in the book is a little bit outdated. That's why I'm writing this new book. I'd encourage you to pick it up, but it won't be available until sometime March or February of next year, 2022. But I'm also writing articles, a series of articles about the 11 things. And you can get four or five of them, depending on what time you're watching this, on the website. So I encourage you again to go to the website. Again, I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you. So feel free to reach out to me on my website, but also feel free. We're about to have a conversation. What I love about this is Eric set this up so that I've been talking to you already while you're watching me, which is weird. And now we're going to talk live together. So yeah, you can make the difference. You are the most important person in that classroom. I know it sounds weird and sounds self-centered, but you're the one who sets the tone and can make the difference. And the beauty is that you and we have the privilege of changing the lives of students. Let's go do it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your talk, Jon. I'm very excited and looking forward to the questions. There has been an energetic discussion in the chat and you've been engaging, so that's great. I see hands going up already. But if I may, I have one question that I would like to ask you, and that is about your origin story as an advocate for the flipped classroom. What happened that made you want to do the work? Because as you said, it's a lot of work. In a system or an environment, and I'm assuming there are a lot of things that keep us from changing the amount of work, administration, student expectations, our own limitations based on how we've learned to teach. So could you say a little bit more about your origin story and how this happened, flipped classroom?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. So Aaron, Sam, and I are teaching at Woodland Park High School in Woodland Park, Colorado. If anybody knows Colorado, it's a small mountain town, 8,500 feet. And a lot of our students would leave at noon because when you're a small rural school, small-ish, with 1,000 students, but it's a county high school. So if someone was going to a basketball game, the closest school was a 45-minute drive, and some were 3.5-hour drives to go to a competition. So often our kids would leave at noon to go to a basketball game or whatever. And so we would have kids gone all afternoon and we'd have to help them make up. I was teaching mostly chemistry at the time. And it was how do we help these kids? And one day Aaron walks in, he said, Jon, I discovered some software that would record our lectures. It's screen capture software at the time. We said, oh, wow, that could solve the problem for our kids who are missing homework or missing class. And we said, well, let's start recording. So we recorded our lectures in the morning and we said, hey, you can watch the video. And then the story gets a little twisted here or interesting. One day after we've been doing this for some time, the assistant superintendent, curriculum director, she came down and she said, I love what you guys are doing, this recording of the lectures. She said, hey, my daughter's attending Colorado State University and one of her professors is recording his lectures and she loves it. And we said, so how come she loves it? And she said, and this is the weird thing. She said, she loves it because she doesn't have to go to class anymore. And later that day, we said, was that not the weirdest conversation? And we said, wait a second, are we encouraging kids not to come to class? And then it really was Aaron's idea. And Aaron said, well, what if we pre-recorded the lectures and everybody watched them at home? And I said, dude, we are so going to do that. And that's how it got started. And let me also say something about the origin of flipped learning. Just that Aaron and I did come up with in that conversation in 2007. But if you look back in the research, you'll find that Glenn Platt, a professor of economics at Ohio State University not Ohio State, University of somewhere in Ohio. I forget the name of the university. Anyways, economics professor, he published a paper in 1999 where he called it inverted classroom, and he did some work with videotapes. And so I imagine how difficult that was logistically. And so, in 2007, when Aaron and I were starting to experiment with all this stuff, YouTube was barely born, but the beginnings of the ability to do this on a large scale was just happening. So we were really we like to say we're pioneers and the popularizers of the model. And you can also even argue that Eric had a big role in the origin of flipped learning and the work that he did in the 90s. So, I don't want to take credit that we invented the model, but that's how we started doing it.
Thank you. Fascinating. So please raise your hand if you have any questions. I see Maksuda. Go ahead.
Hi. So it's a two-part question, right? So first of all, I love it. Like, I think the idea of giving kids so much freedom is something we teachers are often afraid of doing, right? Especially if we're at a Title I school, which should not be the case. I think I agree with you that the more freedom we give the students, the better they actually do, because they want to, like, okay, if you trust me, I'll trust you back. But my question goes to more of the assessment piece, right? Let's assume you're teaching a subject, either if you're in a school which has a common assessment for all classes and you have to take it, or it could be an AP exam at the end. So it's a two-part question. Let's assume I've got 1 week to do Newton's laws, or 2 weeks, right? Everybody's going at their own pace, and 20% of the students have not reached that 80% mastery. Do you move on? And would that mean at that time you'd have different units going on at the same time in your classroom? And what if by the end of it, when it's the AP exam time, those students going at a slow pace have done 3 out of the 10 units? What happens then?
All right, that's a great question. And that's something that we discovered our first year of doing mastery. So we decided to do mastery. There's an origin story to that. But when we started doing mastery, what I did towards the end of the first year is I turned to Aaron and said, I don't think I can keep doing this. Because what had happened is the gap between the kids who were, on target and the kids who were behind was so great that it was logistically killing me. And then we had this sort of aha moment, and we said, wait a second, what if we reorganize our units? This was a chemistry class, and we had 10 units in chemistry, and I don't know if you guys also teach chemistry, but unit 5, which ended at the first semester, was stoichiometry. And what happened was we had some students only got through unit 4, but you can't do the rest of the year without stoichiometry. And so we had some students starting on unit 5 for stoichiometry, while the next group was starting on maybe gas law, it was unit 6 during second semester. And then the gap that second semester got wider and wider and wider, and it was a disaster. But Aaron, again, came up with the idea. He said, well, what if we reorganize our units and we put something that's non-essential as the last unit? So we reorganize the order of our units so that the last unit was not as important, and it's not going to kill them if they miss it. What I'm recommending now, and this is what I do now, is that I put up a series of clear objectives, and then the essential ones are the first 5. So, and then if they miss the last 2 objectives, let's call it the essential objectives and the nice to know objectives, I can keep the students more together and on pace. So then students will get and will master the vast majority of the topics, maybe 80% of the content. It really does work if you hold them to it. We're seeing this. I mean, I in the chat, I don't know if you saw this, but I worked with a brand new teacher this year to talk about a tough year to be a first year teacher, 24-year-old young lady who did flip mastery with the most disadvantaged students in a Title I school and was wildly successful. I did a lot of consulting with her and helping her, and it just worked. I mean, the comments that those students made, that I heard through her was, someone who finally gets us and gives us the time and the space to learn. Most people just think we're stupid. Literally, just some quotes that she shared. It really does work, but it's a lot of work for you. It's a lot harder to teach this way. I'm going to say that. I mean, it's much more work. I'm not sure if I've answered all your questions. And one other thing I'd say is I had to be comfortable with students learning 80% of the content, let's just say, as opposed to being exposed to everything and knowing nothing. Because if a student takes a test, I mean, in the old days, I'd give the test and I think I said this in the video, yeah, and they got a 32, I moved on. But they never really learned it. And I'd rather them know, and this is a philosophical choice I believe in, is I'd rather them actually know 80% of the content instead of be exposed to everything and know nothing.
That whole age-old depth versus width of knowledge.
Exactly. And there are people in a mastery context that have been writing this book. I've talked to 30 different mastery teachers across the world, and many of them are constrained by assessments they have to give on a specific date. And there's something actually interesting on some level. I almost like envy them, because if that's the case, the kids actually will say, wait, I have this one shot at this one test on this one day. I've got to get ready. And there's a flurry of activity that happens as they're getting ready to prepare. And when there is that external thing, they appreciate all of the pre-work that happens going up to that. I was talking with a teacher in Australia, and their whole grade is determined on a one-shot test that's administered by the government, not by them, in some of their classes. And he does the mastery model all the time. And the students see that this is helping them to prepare for, think of it kind of like similar to an AP test. I taught AP for many, many years, AP chemistry. And so I understand that content or that paradigm very, very well.
Thank you.
Great question. Next, we have Jennifer Mosher.
Hi, can you hear me?
I sure can, Jennifer.
Out of my normal setup. Could you say a little bit more about how you manage your classroom, especially early in the year, to get students working collaboratively with each other? Because looking at those pictures, I'm guessing that it's not just you walking around helping. I'm guessing students are helping each other across groups a lot of the time.
Yeah, at some level, let me say this. I've been in the last few years reading a lot about the literature, the research on learning, and particularly flipped learning. And I was once asked a question by a researcher when I was in China, and he asked me this question. He said, John, I get it that flipped learning and mastery learning works, but why? Why does it work? And so as I thought about that, and now I feel like I'm validated, I've talked to a number of researchers, I'm going to sort of summarize all of educational research into two camps. This is very simplistic, so if you're an educational researcher, forgive me for being probably too simplistic, but if you were to summarize educational research, I would say there's two buckets. Number one, active learning wins. And that looks like flip, that looks like mastery, that looks like project-based learning, that looks like inquiry, that looks like modeling, it looks like all those things. And then you couple that in with relationships. So I think those are the two main ingredients for making schools work. So to that end, to answer your question, I think it's about building relationships with the students, connecting with them on the affective way. I do things like I have an opening question that kind of gets at who are you? And this is especially true in the COVID stuff. And they get to know each other. And then I'm roving around the room, connecting with them around physics, around geology, around chemistry, the topics I teach, but also trying to get to know them. And I think they see that. I know they see that. And it was very gratifying to hear, I was nominated for Teacher of the Year. I mean, things like that the students, they really appreciate that personal connection. Because, there's other things I do is I teach them how to watch a video at the beginning of the year. There's some very specific sort of structures that are in place. I talked about why. I've got a video that I send home to them, also to their parents, that explains why they're in this kind of a classroom. Another thing I did is I shot a video at the end of every year where I have former students talk to their peers and how will you be successful in this kind of a class? And so they hear from their peers, not me. They're going to listen to them way better than me. And every year I reshoot that video so that it's a student who either just graduated or is still at the school, somebody they would recognize. I even have my students make videos as part of their projects, especially in my geology class, and their goal is to make a video better than mine. And so that video becomes their flip video that they watch, and they try to one up their previous kids or the previous peers so that they can be the one that gets shown. It's about 90-10, 90 my videos and 10% their videos right now. I'd love to see it 80-20, but so there's some ideas.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. So John, you mentioned a couple of things that I think get at the philosophy of education, the assumptions we make about education, and thinking about the Great Reset and COVID and this opportunity that it has provided. If we had the ability to redesign, and forgive me for a very hypothetical question, and redo or start from scratch physics education, what would you say is the aim of physics education, or aims? And then with that, a follow-up, who should take physics? I think you started to talk about that, but or you mentioned it.
I think almost everyone should take physics. It's actually a beef. Sorry, my school, but my school sometimes can be a little bit elitist in who takes physics. I was able to at least get, at one point, that you had to be in pre-calculus to take physics. We have 2 levels of physics at our school, actually 3. We've got an honors physics, a regular physics, and then AP. I just teach the regular physics, and they said conquer enrollment in pre-calc, and I said, why? And so I was at least able to say, no, just, you took algebra 2. And so we were able to help get more students in physics. I still think more students should take physics, especially at a high-performing school. We don't have enough kids taking physics, and it bothers me. So I'm working on that. What was the other half of the question?
What would you say is the aim of physics education? Oh, yeah. Aim or aims? If we could center one thing,
Maybe this is super broad, but I want the kids to develop a wonder of the natural world, to be curious and love exploring and playing with natural stuff. I mean, at the last unit of the year, we did electromagnetic induction, and I think it was the best unit of the year. As the students, I said, make a motor, figure it out. I've got a bunch of supplies here. And, they had these batteries and wires and coils, and then they had to explain, and they made, this spinny, it was awesome as they designed these. A lot of them looked on YouTube, but then part of the sort of the formative assessment, totally part of the formative assessment is explain to me how this is working. And so they had to, they made direct motors, and then also its relation to a generator, obviously the reverse, we all know that. But it was fascinating to watch them, their design, as they struggled to make their motors, and they get it kind of working, and but they had design issues. It was really fun to just watch them, and then just to go, wow, that's how electricity works. Sort of big broad strokes instead of all right, let's all learn how to do this super difficult inelastic collision problem with 2 variables. I taught that still, right? But I'd rather them see, and I'm thinking broadly, right? I'm not teaching the kids going on to engineering school. My kids are the kids who are taking physics. I don't have the super math gene kids. They take the other teacher's honors class. And there's a point and a place for some of that stuff, and introducing the calculus, because I know you can't understand physics totally without calculus in a certain sense, but also I'm teaching the regular kid. I'm not teaching the advanced kid. And if I could have them walk out with a wonder of the natural world and some understanding of how it works, I've won.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. So I think that's a great note on which to end, a wonder of the natural world. And to name it, I want to say that even though we've had a different focus for each of our days in the conference, in one way, shape, or form, a wonder of the natural world has come across every single day through our questions and conversations. So that was a great note on which to wrap up. Thank you. And thank you all for your great questions and your engagement. Like I've said before, completely re-energizing and motivating to be with all of you. With that, we're going to transition to our panel, but we're going to take a 5-minute break. So 5-minute break, we'll be back at 2:05. Thank you all.